Yes guys, welcome back to the channel, I'm Brad and welcome to the Premier League predictions for game week 28. So of course this is the first general football content on the channel that I will be posting, and I want to make this weekly thing where I go through the Premier League and predict the result of each match. Of course there's a full set of fixtures this weekend, including the first one being tonight. So I'll go through all 10, give you a preview of the match and then my thoughts on the scoreline. There's some big games this weekend that will matter towards the top and the bottom of the table. Before we get any further, if you enjoy this sort of content, leave the video a like, subscribe to the channel. Any subscribers or likes are greatly appreciated. Starting off on Friday is the Midlands derby between Wolves and Aston Villa. Of course, two teams at opposite ends of the table are looking to try and get back into some form, especially for Aston Villa. As you can see, they've only got one win in the last 5 matches, and that was a 1-0 home win to Brighton. And even against Brighton, they needed a late goal to win that game. Of course, Wolves have picked up the odd couple of points recently, but it isn't going to be enough to stay up, I don't think. I think for Wolves now, they just want to reach that 12-point mark. At the moment, they're on 10. Of course, they're on track to be the worst Premier League team ever, but they only need 2 points to make sure that doesn't happen. I think Aston Villa will win this 2-0, but I don't think it'll be straightforward. I think Wolves will sit quite deep and obviously frustrate Villa in that way. But I think Rodgers and Buendia will score them goals to ensure Villa get that win. Going down to the South Coast now for the 12:30 game on Saturday, Bournemouth versus Sunderland. Bournemouth seem to be on decent form at the moment, unbeaten in their last 5, and they've managed to push themselves with their win all the way up to 8th in the table. Whereas for Sunderland, they're on bad form at the moment. Of course, their only win in the Premier League in the last 5 is, of course, that one to Burnley. Of course, last time out for Sunderland was a disappointing game, losing 3-1 to Fulham at home. And of course, I think Granit Xhaka has been a massive miss for Sunderland, how they tick in that midfield. And Bournemouth, like I mentioned, have been on good form, especially that Rayan. I think it'll be a very well contested match between two teams who are about a similar level. But ultimately, I think home advantage will do it for Bournemouth. They'll win 2-1. I think Brobby will get the goal for Sunderland, but Krupi and Scott will get the goals that seal Bournemouth the win. The first 3 o'clock kickoff on Saturday is Burnley versus Brentford. And of course, it feels like a big game for Burnley if they want to try and get out of this relegation zone. It's looking unlikely though, considering they're 8 points away from safety. But this home game against Brentford will be one to look at to try and get 3 points. Of course, Burnley have lost 3 of the last 5, including that shock defeat to Mansfield in the FA Cup. But last time out, they managed to snatch a point in the dying moments against Chelsea, so it's a solid point. Whereas Brentford in their last 5, of course, lost to Brighton, but they snatched some valuable points against Newcastle, Arsenal and Villa. Of course, Brentford are sitting in 7th at the moment, chasing them European places, and we'll see this game as a perfect opportunity to get 3 points. And I can see Brentford doing exactly that. I'm going for a 2-0 away win, and I think it'll be Igor Thiago and Kevin Schade on the score sheet. On to Merseyside now for Liverpool versus West Ham. Of course, it's a very tough away game for West Ham, who are sitting in the relegation zone at the moment. But both teams are on relatively decent form, of course, only 1 loss each in the last 5. But the main concern for West Ham is they're drawing 2 in the matches and not finding that winner. Of course, draws at home to Man United and Bournemouth, they'd want to get 3 points out of one of them games at least. For Liverpool, their only loss in the last 5 is that one against Man City in dramatic fashion. But other than that, they've picked up valuable points, including the last minute winner at Forest in that game against Sunderland. It's a very vital game for Liverpool if they want to get Champions League football next season, as they're only 3 points behind Manchester United in 4th for that Champions League spot. But I suppose the thing that could work in Liverpool's favour is 5th place also being a Champions League spot. I think ultimately Liverpool will get the job done 3-1. I can see Ekitike getting a brace, Gakpo getting the third, and then Soucek getting a consolation for West Ham. Now we move up north for the final 3 PM game of Saturday, and that is of course Newcastle versus Everton, who are having very similar seasons in the league. And of course Newcastle are fresh off that 3-2 victory over Karabag on the night in 9-3 on aggregate. Of course Newcastle in the last 5 matches in all competition only played 2 in the Premier League. Of course they beat Tottenham 2-1 away from home, then they lost to Man City 2-1 away. They picked the majority of their points up at St James's Park, so they'll be happy this one's at home. As for Everton, they're not on brilliant form, 2 draws, 2 losses and 1 win in the last 5. But of course that last win did come away from home at Fulham, and Everton do seem to have hit a bump in the road, especially since Grealish got injured. It's definitely a tough one to call, as I could see this going either way. I'm going to go for a 1-1 draw with Harvey Barnes and James Tarkowski picking up the goals for respective teams. Now we go back down to Yorkshire for the 5:30 game, Leeds versus Manchester City. Of course Leeds, after a slow start, definitely rejuvenated their season in about November-December time. They're on mixed form at the moment, they've lost 1, won 1, but drawn 3 of the last 5. Of course, so the benefit for Leeds is that one of them draws was a win on penalties in the FA Cup against Birmingham, whereas Manchester City are bang on form at the moment, 5 wins in a row in all competitions, and you have to go back 6 Premier League matches for the last time they lost. I think this game will be the entertainer, one of the best of the weekend. I can see there being plenty of goals, as I can see both teams going for it in a way. I can see it being a real flip-flop game. I'm going to go 3-2 Manchester City. I think for Manchester City, Haaland will bag a brace, Marmoush will get the third. As for Leeds, I think their 2 goals will come through Ampadu and Calvert-Lewin. Moving on to Sunday's fixture, of course the first one is Brighton versus Nottingham Forest, a 2 PM kickoff. And I've got to say it's a tie between 2 teams who don't really know what form is. Of course, in their last 5 combined, there's only 1 win in the Premier League and 1 win in other competitions, with Brighton losing 3 of the last 5 and Nottingham Forest losing 2 of the last 5, drawing the other 2. Of course, last time out for Brighton was an impressive 2-0 away win at Brentford, and of course Nottingham Forest got hit by McAllister dagger in the last minute. But of course Nottingham Forest's previous game, 3-0 win away from Fenerbahce, is very impressive indeed, and it definitely makes this one very hard to predict in terms terms of who comes out with the points. Of course, with a new manager, it's always hard to predict in terms of their first few games, but I think as a game Vitor Pereira and Nottingham Forest will be looking to try and get 3 points from. I can definitely see a 1-1 draw written all over this, with Danny Welbeck and Gibbs White getting the goals. Next up, we've got the first of 2 London derbies in the Premier League this weekend. Of course, it's Fulham versus Tottenham Hotspur at Craven Cottage. Of course, Fulham have lost 3 out of the last 5 games, only one of them 2 wins being in the Premier League, whereas Tottenham Hotspur haven't won in the Premier League since the 28th of December away to Crystal Palace. And of course, last time out for Tottenham was that 4-1 demolition job by Arsenal, especially Eze. And it wasn't a brilliant start for new manager Igor Tudor. Of course, it'd be interesting to see how he sets up for this one. As for Fulham, they recorded a very impressive 3-1 victory away from home at Sunderland. Of course, Fulham had a slow start to the season, but now they look like they could be contending for European places. And I think the pain and misery will continue for Tottenham Hotspur. I think Fulham will win this one 2-0. I can see the goal scorers being Harry Wilson and former Arsenal man Alex Iwobi. The final 2 PM match sees Crystal Palace travel to Old Trafford to face Manchester United. Of course, Manchester United under interim manager Michael Carrick have been absolutely flying so far, 1 draw and the rest have been wins. Of course, for Crystal Palace, some disappointing results recently, including that one against Burnley where they collapsed. This is being filmed on Wednesday afternoon, so I don't know the result of the European match on Thursday for Crystal Palace yet. But of course, the first leg was a disappointing 1-1 draw away from home and they should be winning. It took until 90 minutes for Crystal Palace to find that winner against 10-man Wolves last time out. And this may sound bold, but I'm going to go for a Manchester United 3-0 victory. I think it'll be Ahmad, Bruno Fernandes and Cunha all on the score sheet. And then of course the big game of the weekend, Arsenal versus Chelsea in that 4:30 slot. Of course, both teams have had a slight wobble recently, drawing to teams they shouldn't be drawing against. In Arsenal's case, that's Wolves and Brentford away, whereas Chelsea could only manage to get draws against Leeds and Burnley respectively. Of course, since being appointed, Rosenior's only lost 2 games there, both against Arsenal in the FL Cup. But other than that, he's unbeaten in the Premier League, so it'll be interesting to see how this one goes. Of course, Arsenal are brimming full of confidence after that 4-1 demolition job at Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. I can see this being quite a tight affair. I'm going to go for a 2-1 Arsenal victory. I think Declan Rice will bag the opener for Arsenal before João Pedro equalises. And I think quite late on, Gyökeres will nab all 3 points for Arsenal. But I think despite being a low scoreline, this game will be full of entertainment. And there we go, guys. That's my prediction for this weekend's Premier League fixtures. As always, if you enjoyed this content and want to see more of it, leave the video a like, subscribe to the channel. These are going to be a regular thing, of course, predicting the Premier League every week. And when I get a chance, I'll do a review of the game weeks and see which players stood out. Like I mentioned, leave this video a like, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you guys in the next one.